I'm actually talking to the receiver that I have here in the back of the room in real time, live. There's no software, there's no push to save. Here's the funky IP address that my laptop issued to the receiver, and that's the IP address that I typed into my browser to come up with the web applet here. So you can see all of your inputs. You can see which HDMI it is, which optical or digital input I'm using if I'm not using one. You can turn that on and off. Again, if you want to tell the receiver I want to use the video feed from an HDMI but the audio feed from another digital source, you can hybridize and combine those two. In the case that I can think of most common is first generation HDMI devices that had the audio run separate from the picture. If your customer still has those things, hopefully you can sell them something new, but if you can't, you can still utilize those products with our gear. A couple of things as far as tips and tricks, or things that I say are the best way to get the most performance-wise out of the receivers, is to do a couple of things here. First and foremost is you want to get the most impact out of your subwoofer, or subwoofers, depending on what you're doing. You want to set your speaker size in the front to small. Reason being is if you set it to large, it's going to pull some of that LFE information off of the subwoofer channel and try and drive it through the front speakers, because you told the receiver, hey, I want to have my speakers as large in the front. So now you'll see if I set it to large, I can change the option on the other speakers, but if I set my front to small, it's going to lock all the options out. So what have I done? Basically, all I've done is turned on the crossover section in the receiver here, so you'll see that I have my crossover frequencies set. 40 hertz is the lowest for the front, and I just sort of randomly assign some other frequencies to the rest of the outputs. But again, if you want to get the most bang for your buck out of your subwoofers, set your front speakers to small, and then set your crossover frequency accordingly. And then in the network settings tab, just give you guys a couple of feature sets and rundowns here, but I get asked this question, and this is something we deal with on occasion. What's the best way to set this thing up to control it via IP? Because we don't do Wi-Fi built into the receiver, the most reliable way to always consistently get the same IP address to the receiver is to set a static IP and a port reservation on your router, and then leave the receiver set up to acquire automatically, so that every time the receiver pings the router, it's always going to get the same IP address every single time. There's going to be no IP conflicts just because you do static IP in the receiver. If it pulls the router and it's all dynamic in the router, it may have already issued that address somewhere else. So in order to avoid that, leave the receiver itself on DHCP and do your static IP or your port reservation on your router or on your network device. If you're controlling via IP, this is another critical setting that you do need to change from out of the box, and that's network standby. So if you want to change how the receiver reacts, of course, and what happens to the network switch or network port on the receiver when you turn it on and off, out of the box, network standby is set to off for Energy Star and some of the other ratings that we're going after. But if you want to control it and wake it up over the network, you've got to turn network standby to on. So now if the receiver is in a standby mode, the receiver will go to sleep, but the network will stay active and alive on the back of the unit. And then last but not least is one of the features that these receivers are sold on and kind of designed around, is a feature called Music Connect. So if you want to integrate, or you are integrating with Sonos or Sony high-res audio players, you can actually turn the receiver on to a preset input at a preset volume to a pre-selected output zone, whether it's the main zone or zone 2. And all the customer has to do is turn on their Sonos app or turn on their Sonos interaction, hit play in the zone that's associated with the receiver. If the receiver's off, it'll turn it on to that preset volume level. If it's on another input, it'll jump to the input that you've selected, because it's monitoring that data traffic to the Sonos device that you've got connected there. But you would just pull the network there by using the refresh button. It'll list all of the devices that you have with Sonos via MAC address. You pick the button, or you pick the MAC address that's associated with the unit you have connected to the receiver. Again, tell it which input you're using, which volume level you want it to turn on at, and which zone you're in. Just to kind of point out here though, the 5000 ES, the big one, allows you to connect to 2 different Sonos devices. The 1000, 2000, and 3000 is just a single Sonos device. One other thing I wanted to point out here in the network settings tab, and related to Music Connect, and this is just from what I've been hearing from the field and from voice of customer. If you have a single Sonos device in the system, like you're using Sonos as a solution, as a source as opposed to a solution, like, okay, Sonos is one of the options that you have on the receiver, you don't have a bigger Sonos system in the house, you can still use IP control, no problem, you shouldn't have any issues. However, if you've got the receiver integrated into a bigger Sonos system where you've got multiple zones of Sonos, it's best practice to not use IP control and Music Connect. You're going to have much better results, much more success if you're using serial control or IR control. Other than that, we've got all of your other options here for audio, for HDMI connectivity. Again, I would recommend that you turn the 4K scaling off on all of your devices except for your end display. Again, you can turn the pass-through on so you can send video signals through the receiver even if it's not turned on. I know you can really tailor this receiver to kind of fit the solution that you're using. If you're using the matrix inside the receiver to split video and audio between different rooms, you can actually tell the receiver what's going on in the second zone. So for example, you're going to use the amplifier to drive those second zone speakers. You've got a TV in the second room or an amplifier or you want to use the amplifier to drive the second zone, so you can kind of toggle between those two. Or at the bottom here, zone 2 amp means that you've got a secondary AV receiver in the second room, so you'll actually be able to get full surround sound in both zones just by changing these settings here. So again, just to be clear and just so you guys know, if you want to share the same source with 2 different displays, you have surround sound in the main zone and maybe you've got a bedroom TV on the second zone, it will down mix to 2 channel in the second zone while maintaining surround sound in the main zone. So again, you just want to set the connectivity here, the option for that, as zone 2 TV plus amp, so that when they turn on the second zone on the TV for that same source, they're going to get stereo sound and you'll maintain full surround in the main zone. Other than that, these are really the big bells and whistles that I wanted to point out here. You'll notice also here on the 5000, if you've got some higher bandwidth sources or some higher bandwidth devices that you're plugging in, your 4K Blu-ray players or upcoming 4K devices that are outputting 10-bit video, you want to change those particular inputs to enhanced format, so they'll accept those 4K 60p 10-bit video signals as opposed to just locking it down for standard format like a Blu-ray player or cable box, etc.